Whispers of Shadow presents. Written and narrated by Gregory Sparrow. The letter delivered before it was written. Prologue. At exactly 9:17 a.m. on the morning of October 14th, 2019, a Royal Mail postman pushed a handwritten envelope through the letterbox of a small stone cottage in the village of Ashcombe, North Yorkshire. The delivery took less than 4 seconds. Nothing about it appeared unusual. The envelope carried the correct postage. The barcode scanned without error. The address was handwritten. The sender's name was clear. The postman continued his route without stopping. 6 minutes later, Royal Mail received an emergency call from the man who had opened the letter. He wasn't reporting a threat. He wasn't reporting fraud. He asked only one question. How can someone send me a letter before they've written it? At first, customer service assumed it was a joke. It wasn't, because 72 hours later, police officers in Birmingham found the sender sitting alone at his kitchen table. He was writing the very same letter, word for word, comma for comma, mistake for mistake, exactly as it had already been delivered. The investigation that followed remained sealed inside Royal Mail's internal archives for 6 years. Officially, the incident never happened. Unofficially, it became case file RM013. Everything you're about to hear comes from internal investigation reports, delivery logs, witness interviews, security recordings, and documents that were never intended to leave the Royal Mail archive. My name is Daniel Mercer. In early 2025, I was granted temporary access to a collection of files marked Restricted Second Delivery Protocol. One folder was different from the rest. No title, no date. Only 4 handwritten words across the cover. Do not interrupt delivery. That warning would begin to make sense only after I discovered that the impossible letter wasn't the real mystery. The real mystery was why Royal Mail had been hiding similar cases for more than 50 years. The first delivery. Ashcombe was the kind of village where everyone knew the sound of the morning post. Fewer than 800 people lived there. The post office closed years ago. The nearest railway station was almost 15 miles away. Nothing extraordinary ever happened in Ashcombe. That was precisely why Royal Mail investigators paid attention. Impossible events rarely began in places where people expected them. They began somewhere quiet, somewhere ordinary, somewhere no one would think to question a routine delivery. Michael Turner had delivered mail in the area for nearly 23 years. His colleagues described him as meticulous. He'd never skipped an address, never misdelivered a parcel, never left registered mail without obtaining the proper confirmation. His body camera, introduced only months earlier as part of a delivery safety trial, documented every stop along his route. Reviewing the footage later, investigators found nothing unusual. The weather was damp. A light mist drifted across the empty road. Birdsong, passing traffic in the distance. Everything appeared exactly as it should. At 9:17 a.m., Michael scanned a registered envelope addressed to Mr. Andrew Collins, 18 Hawthorne Lane, Ashcombe, North Yorkshire. The scanner confirmed successful delivery. Michael pushed the envelope through the brass letter slot. It landed softly on the wooden floor inside the hallway. He walked away without looking back. The entire interaction lasted 3 seconds. Nothing in the recording suggested that Michael Turner had just delivered one of the most closely guarded pieces of evidence in Royal Mail's history. Andrew Collins was a 38-year-old secondary school history teacher. Married, 1 daughter, no criminal record, no known mental illness, no connection to government agencies, intelligence services, or Royal Mail beyond receiving ordinary post. His statement, recorded later that afternoon, would remain remarkably consistent over 6 years of interviews. According to Andrew, he picked up the envelope immediately after hearing it fall through the letterbox. He assumed it was another utility bill. Instead, he found a handwritten letter. The first line stopped him cold. Andrew, when you finish reading this, do not call your sister. She will call you first, at exactly 9:31 this morning. He checked the clock. It was 9:24 a.m. His sister lived in Edinburgh. She almost never called without warning. Andrew remembered smiling. Someone was playing an elaborate prank. He continued reading. The second paragraph unsettled him. You are standing in the hallway. The kettle is boiling in the kitchen. You can hear the dog scratching at the back door. In a few seconds, you will check whether anyone is outside. There won't be. Andrew admitted he did exactly that, without thinking. He opened the back door. The garden was empty. When he stepped back inside, the telephone rang. He looked at the clock. 9:31 a.m. His sister was calling. She had no idea why. She simply said she had a strange feeling she should check on him. Andrew never told her about the letter. Instead, he ended the call, locked the front door, and read the rest. The final paragraph was only 2 sentences long. The person who sent this letter hasn't written it yet. You must convince Royal Mail before it's too late. Andrew folded the paper carefully. Then he dialed the number printed on the back of the envelope. Royal Mail Customer Services. He later told investigators that, by the time the operator answered, he had already accepted one impossible fact. The letter somehow knew exactly what he had done over the previous 7 minutes. The second impossible fact would change his life forever. The call. The recording of Andrew Collins's call to Royal Mail still exists. It lasts 6 minutes and 42 seconds. For the first 3 minutes, nothing seems unusual. 9:32 a.m. Royal Mail Customer Services. This is Sarah speaking. How may I help you today? Andrew answered immediately. His voice was calm, measured. the voice of a man trying very hard to sound rational. "I think someone has made a mistake." Sarah asked for the tracking number. Andrew read it from the envelope. She entered it into the system. Everything appeared normal. Registered first class, processed at the Leeds Mail Center, delivered at 9:17 a.m., exactly as scheduled. "What seems to be the problem, Mr. Collins?" There was a brief pause. Then Andrew said something that caused Sarah to stop typing. "The person who sent this letter hasn't written it yet." Sarah assumed she had misunderstood. She politely asked him to explain. Andrew began reading sections of the letter aloud. Not the personal details, only the timestamps, the phone call, the back door, his sister calling at 9:31. Sarah interrupted him. "Sir, are you saying the letter predicted those events?" Andrew answered quietly. "No. It remembered them." Those words would later appear in nearly every internal report connected to case RM013. Sarah followed procedure. She verified the sender's details printed on the envelope. Peter Langford, Birmingham. She asked Andrew whether he knew the man. "No." "Have you ever met him?" "No." "Do you recognize the handwriting?" "No." She continued the checklist. "Would you be willing to allow Royal Mail investigators to examine the letter?" Andrew agreed immediately. Before ending the call, Sarah asked one final question, one she almost forgot to include. "Mr. Collins, has anything else unusual happened since you opened the envelope?" Andrew hesitated long enough for Sarah to ask if he was still there. When he finally answered, his voice was barely above a whisper. "I think someone just delivered another letter." Sarah frowned. "Our records don't show another delivery." "I know." Andrew swallowed. "But I heard something." The letterbox. It opened. Sarah looked at the clock. 9:38 a.m. No postman was scheduled anywhere near Hawthorne Lane. She asked Andrew not to touch anything. Instead, she asked him to walk into the hallway while staying on the phone. The recording captured every step. Wooden floorboards, a door opening, silence. Then Andrew stopped walking. For several seconds, he said nothing. Finally, Sarah asked what he could see. His answer was short. "Nothing." "There isn't another letter?" "No." "No. The mat is empty." Sarah started to reassure him. Then Andrew interrupted. "But the front door is unlocked." "I locked it after your first call." "I know I locked it. It's open now." The recording ended moments later. Not because Andrew hung up, because the call disconnected. Telephone engineers later confirmed there had been no fault on the line. The connection simply stopped. By 10:18 a.m., two Royal Mail investigators were driving toward Ashcombe. They expected to collect one unusual letter. Instead, they found something far more disturbing. Andrew Collins was waiting outside his cottage. The handwritten letter was exactly where he said it would be, on the kitchen table. But there was something else beside it. A red Royal Mail delivery card. The standard type left when a parcel cannot be delivered. Except Andrew insisted it had not been there 5 minutes earlier. Neither investigator had seen it when they entered the house. Yet now, it lay beside the impossible letter as if it had always been there. Printed across the front were the familiar words, "Sorry we missed you." Nothing unusual, until investigator Helen Brooks turned it over. Someone had written one sentence in dark blue fountain pen. The second delivery is never addressed to the house. Neither investigator recognized the handwriting. Not yet. Within 3 days, they would, because hundreds of pages inside the Royal Mail archive had been written by exactly the same hand. The sender. The name on the envelope was easy enough to verify. Peter James Langford, 46 years old, accountant, lives alone in Birmingham. No criminal record, no military service, no connection to Andrew Collins, no family in North Yorkshire, no employment history involving Royal Mail. Investigators expected to find identity theft, or perhaps someone using Peter's name. Instead, they found something far stranger. At 11:40 a.m., Helen Brooks called Peter Langford. He answered on the third ring. His voice sounded tired, as though he had barely slept. Helen introduced herself and asked a simple question. "Mr. Langford, did you send a handwritten letter to Andrew Collins in Ashcombe?" There was a pause. Then Peter laughed nervously. "I don't know anyone called Andrew Collins." Helen asked whether he recognized the address. No. Had he ever visited Ashcombe? No. Had he mailed any handwritten letters during the previous week? Again, no. Nothing about his answers suggested deception. If anything, he sounded genuinely confused. Helen decided not to mention the contents of the letter. Instead, she asked one final question. "Do you own a fountain pen?" Silence, this time much longer. When Peter finally spoke, his voice had changed. "I bought one yesterday." Helen wrote it down. "What color is the ink?" "Blue." "When did you last use it?" Another pause. "I haven't." That answer should have ended the conversation. Instead, it became the first real clue. Peter had purchased a blue fountain pen the previous afternoon. The receipt confirmed it. The pen was still in its original box, unused. The ink cartridge remained sealed. Yet the impossible letter had clearly been written using the same brand of ink. Helen requested local police visit Peter's flat, not to arrest him, simply to verify the facts. 2 officers arrived shortly after 2 p.m. Peter invited them inside without hesitation. Everything appeared perfectly ordinary. The unopened pen rested on the kitchen counter. The receipt was still inside the shopping bag. The cartridge had never been pierced. One officer photographed everything. The other asked routine questions. Peter remained cooperative. Then, as they prepared to leave, he asked something unexpected. "Can I ask you a question?" The officers nodded. Peter looked embarrassed. "I've had the strangest feeling all morning." "What kind of feeling?" He hesitated, as if, "I've forgotten to send something important." The officers exchanged a glance. Neither mentioned the investigation. Instead, they thanked Peter for his time and left. The report they filed that afternoon contained one sentence under behavioral observations. Subject appears anxious about an event that has not yet occurred. Back in Leeds, Helen spread every document across the conference table. The timeline no longer made sense. At 9:17 a.m., the letter had been delivered. At 11:40 a.m., the supposed sender denied writing it. At 2 p.m., police confirmed he had never even used the pen capable of producing it. 3 independent facts, all verified, none compatible with reality. Late that evening, a junior analyst named Oliver Hayes noticed something everyone else had missed. He wasn't looking at the handwriting or the timestamps. He was looking at the envelope itself, specifically the postmark. Every Royal Mail cancellation stamp contained tiny identification marks, unique to the processing machine that applied it. Oliver enlarged the image, then enlarged it again. His expression changed immediately. "Helen, you need to see this." She walked over. The postmark read, Leeds Mail Center, 13th October, 2019. Exactly 1 day before delivery. Perfectly normal. Except beneath the date, almost invisible to the naked eye, was another impression, fainter, partially erased, a second postmark, from the same machine, the same location, but with a different date. Helen leaned closer. The room fell silent. The faded numbers slowly became clear. 17th of October, 2019. 3 days in the future. The letter hadn't been processed once. It had been processed twice. Once before it was written, and once after it would eventually be mailed. The second postmark. For several seconds, no one in the room spoke. Helen stared at the magnified image projected across the conference screen. 1 envelope, 2 official Royal Mail cancellation marks. The first dated 13th October 2019. The second, 17th of October 2019. 3 days after the letter had already been delivered. Oliver checked the scanner, then the original envelope, then the digital archive. Every copy showed the same thing. The second postmark wasn't an image defect. It was physically embedded in the paper, pressed into the fibers by a real Royal Mail cancellation machine. "Is it possible the envelope was processed twice?" Stephen Wallace asked. Oliver shook his head immediately. "No. Once a cancellation mark is applied, the envelope leaves the system. It can never return to automatic processing. Not without someone manually removing every barcode and creating an entirely new registered item." Helen looked back at the envelope. No sign of alteration. No second barcode. No new label. Nothing. She made a decision. If there's a second postmark, then somewhere there has to be a second scan. Royal Mail stored every barcode event inside a central tracking archive. Normally, searching a tracking number took seconds. This search took nearly an hour, because the system kept returning an error no one had ever seen before. Multiple valid timelines detected. The message appeared only once, then vanished. When the search finally completed, everyone in the room leaned toward the monitor. The tracking history contained 2 complete journeys. The first ended exactly as expected. Collected, sorted, delivered, finished. The second had not happened yet. Collection, 17th October, 8:11. Sorting, 17th of October, 10:46. Dispatch, 17th October, 13:02. Status, pending delivery. The room became completely silent. According to Royal Mail's own database, the same letter was scheduled to enter the postal system 3 days in the future. Helen closed the laptop. "We're going to Birmingham." The drive took nearly 3 hours. No one spoke much. Rain swept across the motorway. Gray clouds hung low over the countryside. Every mile brought them closer to a man who, according to every official record, had not yet committed the act investigators were trying to stop. Peter Langford answered the door almost immediately. He looked exhausted. Dark circles beneath his eyes, unshaven, as though he hadn't slept. Before Helen could introduce herself, Peter spoke first. "I've been expecting you." Helen stopped. "You have?" Peter nodded slowly. "I don't know why. But I knew someone from Royal Mail would come today." He stepped aside. "You'd better come in." The flat was spotless, everything neatly arranged, except the dining table. A blank sheet of cream paper lay in the center. Beside it, the unopened fountain pen. Helen looked at Peter. "You still haven't used it?" "No. I keep thinking I should. But every time I pick it up, I feel sick." Helen placed the impossible letter on the table. Peter stared at it. His face slowly drained of color. "I've seen this." Helen frowned. "When?" "I—" He closed his eyes. "I don't remember. But I know every word that's inside." Without touching the envelope, Peter quietly recited the opening sentence. Perfectly, word for word. Andrew Collins, the phone call, the exact time, every line, exactly as written. When he finished, no one in the room moved. Helen carefully opened the envelope. She compared the text. There wasn't a single mistake. Peter had just spoken a letter he insisted he had never seen. Then he looked at the blank sheet of paper. His breathing changed, slow, uneven. He reached toward the unopened fountain pen. Helen instinctively stepped forward. "Don't!" Peter froze. For several seconds, his hand hovered above the pen. Then, the kitchen clock struck 4:17 p.m. Peter suddenly whispered, "It's starting." Before anyone could react, the sealed ink cartridge inside the unopened pen cracked by itself. A single drop of dark blue ink rolled onto the blank page. And, without anyone touching it, the pen slowly began to move. The letter writes itself. No one moved. The pen slid across the paper with impossible precision. Not quickly, not violently, calmly, as though guided by an invisible hand that had written the same letter countless times before. The first line appeared. "Andrew, if you are reading this." Helen stepped closer. It was identical. The same opening sentence. The same handwriting. The same spacing. Every tiny imperfection matched the letter already delivered to Ashcombe. Oliver raised his phone to record it. The screen instantly filled with static. He lowered it. The image returned. He raised it again. Static. Only the paper itself remained impossible to capture. Peter staggered backward. "I told you!" "I've never written it." His voice cracked. "But I know what's coming next." Without looking at the page, he spoke the next sentence aloud. The pen wrote it at exactly the same pace, word after word after word. When Peter stopped speaking, the pen continued, adding a sentence no one had seen before. Helen read it aloud. "You have changed the sequence." The room became silent. That sentence had not appeared in the delivered letter. The pen continued moving. Observation alters repetition. Intervention creates another delivery. Then it stopped. Helen compared the new page with the original. Everything matched until the final 3 lines. Only the ending had changed, which meant something impossible. The future version of the letter was no longer identical to the one already delivered. For the first time, the cycle had shifted. Oliver looked up. If the ending changed, then maybe the delivery hasn't happened yet. Helen nodded slowly. Or we've just created a different one. At that exact moment, Peter's mobile phone rang. Unknown number. He answered on speaker. No one spoke. Only the faint sound of sorting machinery. Rollers, conveyor belts, barcode scanners. The unmistakable sound of a Royal Mail distribution center. Then a man's voice. Calm, professional. Good afternoon. This is your delivery confirmation. Peter frowned. I haven't ordered anything. You have? No, I haven't. There was a brief pause. The voice replied, You will. The line went dead. Helen immediately called Leeds. Stephen Wallace answered. His voice was tense. Helen, you need to come back. What happened? We've found something. What? The CCTV archive. The oldest recordings. Stephen hesitated, then continued. We recovered film from a sorting office that closed in 1968. So? The same postman is on it. Helen felt the blood drain from her face. The man with the reversed logo? Yes. He hasn't aged. Another pause. And that's not the worst part. What is? Stephen took a slow breath. The film ends with him looking directly into the camera. He smiles. And he says, Stephen's voice became almost a whisper. See you in Birmingham. Helen looked around Peter's flat. No one had told anyone in Leeds where the investigation team had gone. Not even Stephen. Yet the man on a film recorded more than 50 years earlier already knew. Outside, a letterbox clicked open once. Then something landed softly on the floor of Peter Langford's hallway. The last letter. For several seconds. No one moved. The sound had been unmistakable. A letter had fallen through the front door. Helen looked toward the hallway. So, nobody opens it alone. Everyone nodded. Oliver switched on the body camera clipped to his jacket. A small red light appeared. Racy. Peter unlocked the hallway door leading from the kitchen. They walked together, slowly. The envelope lay exactly where the first impossible letter should never have been. Cream-colored paper, handwritten address. No stamp. No barcode. Only 3 words. To the investigators. Helen crouched beside it. She didn't touch it immediately. Instead, she studied the floor. No wet footprints, no muddy shoe prints, No signs that anyone had approached the front door. Oliver quietly opened it. Nothing. The porch was empty. The street beyond remained completely still. No van, no postman, no passing pedestrians. It was as if the letter had simply appeared. Helen finally picked it up. It felt unusually warm, exactly as Andrew Collins had described. She turned it over. The seal was already broken. Someone expected it to be opened. Inside, there was only a single sheet of paper. No greeting, no signature, only one paragraph. If you continue searching for the sender, you will never understand the delivery. The sender changes, the recipient changes, the route changes. Only the postman remains. At the bottom of the page, a map had been drawn in blue ink. No labels, no names, just a floor plan. Helen stared at it for several seconds. Then she recognized it. The old sorting hall beneath the Leeds Mail Center, a section of the building that had been sealed in 1986. Nobody in the current management team even used that level anymore. Officially, it had been abandoned after a structural survey. Unofficially, Helen had never seen its layout before. Yet the map was accurate. Every corridor, every loading bay, every emergency exit. Someone knew exactly what still existed beneath the modern building. They drove back to Leeds without stopping. No one spoke during the journey. Each of them kept thinking about the same sentence. Only the postman remains. By the time they arrived, it was almost midnight. Stephen Wallace was already waiting. His expression told Helen everything. "You found something?" Stephen nodded. "I didn't want to tell you over the phone." He handed her an old steel key. Attached to it, a faded cardboard tag. Basement, sorting level B. Where did this come from? Stephen hesitated. It wasn't in storage this morning. It was hanging on my office door when I came back from lunch. No note, only this. He handed her a folded delivery card. On the back, the same familiar handwriting. Every route has an origin. 10 minutes later, 5 people stood outside a heavy steel door beneath the Leeds Mail Center. Dust covered the floor. The hinges were rusted, according to maintenance records. The door had not been opened for more than 30 years. Stephen inserted the key. It turned effortlessly. The lock clicked. The door slowly opened inward. Cold air drifted out. Not damp, not stale, cold, as though the room beyond had been sealed away from time itself. Helen switched on her torch. The beam swept across rows of silent conveyor belts. Old sorting frames, canvas mail sacks, everything frozen exactly as it had been left decades earlier. Nothing had been removed. Nothing had decayed. It looked less like an abandoned workplace and more like a shift that had ended only minutes ago. Then Oliver's flashlight stopped on something at the far end of the hall, a single red Royal Mail bicycle, standing upright, perfectly clean. Beside it hung a freshly pressed Royal Mail uniform, modern, not vintage, ready to be worn. Pinned neatly to the jacket was a brass name badge. It contained no name, only one word: postman. The second sorting hall. No one reached for the uniform. For several long seconds, the only sound inside the abandoned sorting hall was the distant hum of the active mail center somewhere above them. Helen stepped forward first. The torchlight revealed a thin layer of dust covering every conveyor, every sorting frame, every steel locker, everything except the bicycle. Its chrome reflected the light. The tires looked new. A canvas mailbag hung neatly over the rear carrier. There wasn't a single speck of dust on it, as though someone had used it only moments earlier. Oliver carefully unfastened the bag. It was empty, almost. Inside the smallest pocket, he found a leather notebook. No title, no initials. The first page contained a single handwritten sentence. Every delivery is made twice. Helen slowly turned the page. The following entries were arranged like delivery records. 17th of February, 1968. Manchester, completed. 9th of October, 1971. London, completed. The 14th of June, 1978. York, completed. Each date matched one of the sealed RM case files. Every impossible delivery, every investigation, every incident Royal Mail had hidden from the public. Then, the final page. There was only one unfinished entry. The 14th of October, 2019. Ashcombe. Status: in progress. Beneath it, the ink was still wet, as if someone had written the words only minutes earlier. Stephen examined the conveyor system. This level isn't connected anymore. It was disconnected in 1986. Helen looked around the vast hall. If that's true, who switched the lights on? Everyone froze. None of them remembered turning them on. Yet every fluorescent tube above the old sorting floor was now glowing softly, one by one, without a sound. At the far end of the hall, an old conveyor belt shuddered. Once, then again. Its motor should not have worked. The electrical supply had been removed decades ago. Slowly, the belt began to move. Empty, at first. Then, an envelope appeared. No one saw where it came from. It simply rested on the moving belt, traveling toward them. alone. The conveyor stopped less than 2 meters from Helen. The envelope slid neatly into an old brass sorting tray, as though completing the final step of a delivery route. Helen approached cautiously. There was no address, no stamp, only one handwritten instruction: deliver by hand. She opened it. Inside was a single sheet. No greeting, no explanation, only 6 lines. The investigation ends when the letter is delivered. You believe you are searching for the postman. You are wrong. The postman has been following you since 9:17. Helen's pulse quickened. She looked instinctively toward Oliver. His body camera was still recording. The small red indicator blinked steadily. Then, without warning, the camera emitted a sharp electronic tone. Oliver frowned. What was that? The display changed by itself. Instead of showing the live image, it began replaying footage. Not from today. The timestamp read, October 14th, 2019, 9:17. The screen showed Michael Turner standing outside Andrew Collins' cottage. The moment of the first impossible delivery. Everything matched the original recording. Michael scanned the envelope, walked to the door, posted the letter, turned away. Then, something happened that had never appeared in the archived footage. As Michael walked back toward his van, a second postman stepped into frame. He wore the same Royal Mail uniform, the same cap, the same satchel. His reflective logos appeared reversed. He stood perfectly still, watching Michael leave. Then, very slowly, he turned his head, not toward Michael, toward the body camera, toward whoever would one day be watching. He smiled, raised 2 fingers to the brim of his cap, and quietly mouthed 4 words. Your delivery is next. The recording ended. No one spoke. Oliver checked the camera's memory card. The clip did not exist, yet they had all just watched it. Then, from somewhere deep inside the abandoned sorting hall, a bicycle bell rang once, clear, close. None of them had touched the bicycle. When they turned back toward it, the uniform was gone. The final delivery. For a moment, no one breathed. The bicycle was still there. The leather satchel remained hanging from the handlebars. But the uniform had vanished. No footsteps. No opening door. No sound. It was simply gone. Oliver swept his torch across the sorting hall. Nothing. Only silent conveyors disappearing into darkness. Then, a barcode scanner chirped. Once. Every head turned. Another scanner answered from somewhere deeper inside the hall. Then another. Within seconds, dozens of scanners were activating one after another. The sound moved through the abandoned facility like footsteps. Closer, closer, closer. Helen recognized the pattern immediately. It wasn't random. The scanners were activating in the exact sequence a registered letter would travel through the building. Collection, verification, sorting, dispatch, delivery. Someone or something was processing an invisible item. Stephen checked the maintenance terminal mounted on the wall. The dusty monitor flickered to life. One line appeared on the screen. Item ready for final delivery. Below it, a recipient, Helen Brooks. No, Helen whispered. Oliver looked at her. What do we do? Helen thought for only a second. If this thing needs a recipient, then it needs someone to accept delivery. She picked up the blank envelope from the sorting tray. The paper felt warm, almost alive. The moment her fingers closed around it, every scanner in the hall fell silent. Complete silence. Then, footsteps, slow, measured, echoing from the darkness beyond the conveyors. 1, 2, 3. A figure emerged into the edge of the torchlight. Royal Mail cap, dark waterproof jacket, leather satchel, reflective logos. Backwards. His face remained hidden beneath the brim. He stopped 20 feet away, neither threatening nor welcoming, simply waiting. Helen forced herself to speak. Who are you? The figure answered immediately. His voice was calm, polite, professional. The delivery must be completed. Who are you? I am the final step. Helen took another step forward. Are you human? A faint smile appeared beneath the cap. I was. Silence returned. Then he looked directly at Helen. You've spent 4 days looking for the sender. You should have been looking for the recipient. Helen frowned. I am the recipient. No. He nodded toward the envelope in her hands. The investigation is... The words made no sense. Until they suddenly did. Every impossible case, every interview, every report, every sealed archive had existed for one purpose: to ensure the investigation itself reached the people who would conduct it. The letters weren't predicting events. They weren't changing time. They were preserving a sequence, making certain that every investigator eventually followed exactly the same path. Helen looked down at the envelope. Slowly. She opened it. Inside was a single page. Only one sentence. Case RM-013 is now complete. File the report. Seal the archive. Wait for the next delivery. She looked back up. The postman was gone. No footsteps. No closing door. Nothing. Only the empty sorting hall. The bicycle. had disappeared too. 3 weeks later, the official investigation ended. Royal Mail concluded there had been no evidence of fraud, no criminal activity, no security breach. Case RM013 was classified. Every photograph was sealed, every recording archived, every witness signed confidentiality agreements. The abandoned sorting hall beneath Leeds Mail Center was filled with concrete 6 months later. No further access was permitted. Officially, second delivery protocol never existed. Years passed. Nothing happened. No impossible letters. No unexplained deliveries. No reports. Eventually, most of those involved convinced themselves the nightmare was over. Until January 2025. I was sitting inside the Royal Mail archive reading Helen Brooke's final report. The last page contained her signature, the date, the case number. Nothing unusual. I closed the folder. The archivist thanked me for my visit. I left the building. When I arrived home, a cream-colored envelope was lying on my doormat. No stamp, no barcode, just my name, Daniel Mercer, inside. There was only one handwritten sentence.